So now that the world is growing and expanding and feeling its own pains, thanks to imperialism, now we're going to go into what resulted from all of that, which would be World War One. Okay, the causes of World War One. You have militarism. So that means it's the glorification of armed strength and the ideals of war. So each nation wanted a stronger military than a potential enemy. So people kept building up their militaries just in the event that a fight might occur. It's always the idea of looking bigger, badder, and buffer to kind of threaten off the idea of people getting in your way. The alliance system is another cause of World War One. So you've got defense agreements between nations. The Allies, or the Triple Entente, was Great Britain, France, and Russia. And they agreed to help each other in economic ways, in political ways, and military ways. Then you have the Central Powers, who also agreed to the same thing, or also known as the Triple Alliance: Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. These teams pitted nations against nations, and that led to a lot of discord and upset between all these nations. Imperialism. So this is when the stronger countries extend their political or economic control over the weaker countries. Remember, we just covered all this. It provided raw materials and markets for manufactured goods as well. So if I wanted to, say, expand and become imperial, well, what if I'm stepping on another country's toes? What if I'm getting into their imperial area? Nationalism. That is a devotion to the interests and cultures of one's nations. So it created a lot of competition for power and resentment among the countries who were being controlled. Basically, America. The immediate cause of World War One was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who was the heir to the Austrian throne. This was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. It wasn't a major cause like, oh my gosh, everybody was so upset that he was assassinated. It was more, this was the last straw from all of the other causes that it was like, okay, we're done. Let's just go to war. So Austria's response to the Archduke's assassination, they were outraged, obviously. I mean, they would be very, very upset if their crown prince was killed. So they were backed by the promise of Germany's full military support. So Austria-Hungary submitted demands to the Serbians, who assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and they ordered that they comply or they face war. So Serbia knew it had Russian support, and they refused to accept Austria-Hungary's demands. Austria-Hungary then declared war on Serbia on July 28th. So these alliances, they're coming in now, and you can see who backs who, and therefore who feels strong enough to be able to go to war. The war officially started on August 3rd, 1914, with Germany invading Belgium. The Triple Alliance, Austria-Hungary, Germany, and Italy, went to war with the Triple Entente: Britain, France, and Russia. The leaders were, from the United States, Wilson, and Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II. America decided to stay neutral at this point in the war. They refused to take part. For 3 years, they were like, we're staying out, hands off, we're neutral. There was a strong sentiment not to get involved in a European war. They were like, well, why should we join a struggle that's 3,000 miles away? It doesn't threaten our American lives or our property. President Woodrow Wilson said, every man who really loves America will act and speak in the true spirit of neutrality. But you've got this thing called German submarine warfare. Their U-boats, or Unterseeboot, undersea boat, they were kind of attacking random ships. So they wanted to prevent supplies from reaching Britain and claim the waters around England as a war zone. So any enemy or merchant ship found in the waters around Britain would be sunk without warning. Can you see how this might be an issue if you have like passenger boats or random merchant boats that have nothing to do with Britain, but they're going to Britain? So the British passenger liner, the Lusitania, it left New York City for England despite the warnings of the active U-boats. And unfortunately, on May 7th, 1915, the Lusitania sinks and it killed 1,200 people, including many Americans. So the sinking of the Lusitania, it got the Americans very, very angry. and it turned their public opinion against President Wilson. In 1916, his re-election campaign slogan was, "He kept us out of war." He was re-elected by one of the smallest margins in history. The American people were kind of unsure about re-electing him. The Zimmerman Note. It was a telegram which proposed an alliance between Mexico and Germany, promising support to recover lost territory in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. So Germany, basically, it's the precursor of email. So what they did is Germany sent this note to Mexico and said, hey, if you help us out, if you come and fight with us, we will make sure that you get Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona back at the end of the war. Forget the U.S. We promise we'll give this to you. Now, the Zimmerman Note happened to be intercepted by the British, their form of the CIA or Secret Service or whatever, and they saw it. They showed it to the U.S., and the U.S. was like, oh, hold on just a minute. No way. You're not getting our land. That's our land. So that caused a lot of tension between the U.S. and Mexico and Germany at this point in time. U.S. finally decided to enter into World War I in 1917. It joined the Triple Entente, so Britain, Russia, France. America's decision to enter the war was the result of the continuing submarine warfare, those pesky U-boats. They violated the freedom of the seas and America's ties to Great Britain. And America wanted to make the world safe for democracy, according to President Wilson. At this point in time, in 1917, Russia ended up leaving the war. They had a lot of civil stuff going on, a lot of unrest. There were a lot of war-related shortages. There was a lot of people without food, a lot of people without fuel. 5.5 million Russian soldiers were killed, wounded, or taken prisoners, so they were a little tired, and the Russian army refused to fight. So they left, and Russia had its own civil war happen shortly. Modern warfare. So things that happened that helped increase this war and made it a modern war as opposed to any war that came before it. You have the machine gun, which dramatically increased fatalities on the battlefield. Poison gas. It's a yellow-green chlorine fog that sickened, suffocated, burned, and blinded victims. If any of you have ever worked at pools and you have to chlorinate the pools, you know how chlorine gas can be. This is a type of chlorine gas that was very, very awful and had terrible effects on people. Tanks. They were used to mow down the barbed wire and enemy soldiers. You also have trench warfare. So there are trenches on either side of the battlefield which face each other and oppose each other. There's no man's land, which is the area between the trenches. You've got a lot of lice and polluted water. So that caused a lot of infection and dysentery. You also have a lack of sleep, a constant bombardment from the other side, and a lot of battle fatigue, which led to shell shock, which was complete emotional collapse. Think about this as the precursor to PTSD. So this is what trench warfare looks like. If you look at A, that's considered your frontline trench. And then if you have B, that's your support trench and your reserve trench. So all these trenches are connected, but you've got your frontline trench facing the other side. There's barbed wire and no man's land, about 25 yards to a mile wide. And then the other side is your enemy trench, and they have similar trenches set up. So you're basically 4 or 5 feet deep in the ground, dug in a trench, and you live in this trench. Like they set up little sleeping areas and little cooking areas, and you live in this trench, and you can imagine if it rains or snows, it gets muddy, it's not clean. Think about the human waste that you might be having. It's not a pretty or comfortable experience. These are some gentlemen sitting in the trench. So this looks to be about 6-7 feet deep, and then you shoot up over the edge of the trench. This is an image of rot. The feet have gotten so wet, or they've gotten frostbite, and they have become very, very disfigured. So these are the causes of World War I, and this is why the world is kind of in an upheaval. It was known as the Great War.